Thanks for joining us on a show taking a look at all things people, power, and politics. This is a special edition of The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Tonight, our hearts are heavy, and they're with Minnesota and the families of everyone impacted by yet another mass shooting in our country. 2 children killed, 14 children and 3 adults hurt after a gunman opens fire at a Minneapolis Catholic school. We're dedicating our entire show to this important day and to the victims. A developmental psychologist and family therapist is in Studio C to talk about how you can have this conversation with your kids and help them process tragedies like this. We're also talking with former Detroit Police Chief Ralph Godby and a security expert about securing our religious institutions. And Steve Spreitzer, a community member who is well respected, about how we can really try to be more tolerant to people with different views than us and how we can deal with conflict within ourselves and with others. But first, a look at what happened. The 2 children killed in the shooting were 8 and 10 years old. Authorities say they were shot while sitting in church pews. The other 14 kids hurt in the shooting were between the ages of 6 and 15. The 3 adults who were shot, all in their 80s. Police identified the gunman as 23-year-old Robin Westman. We understand the suspect recently changed their name to identify as a woman. They shot and killed themselves after the attack. Authorities say the gunman did not have an extensive known criminal history, and they acted alone. The guns were bought legally. We do know video of the gunman's writings were posted on YouTube, but then taken down. Authorities are reviewing that to try to figure out exactly what happened here. And as the investigation plays out, we're hearing from a young boy who saw the entire tragedy unfold.
My friend got shot in the back. He's in the hospital right now. It was super scary because, we've never practiced it in the church. We've only practiced it in the main school, so we really didn't know what to do. We just got into the pews and he shot through the stained glass windows. My friend Victor, he was laying on top of me, making sure I was safe, and he got hit. So that was really brave of him.
And you have a neck on your neck?
Yeah, I don't even know what it's from. Kind of looks like debris or something.
This poor kid. President Trump ordered flags in all public buildings to half staff to pay respects to the victims of the shooting. He also said he's praying for everybody involved. Such a senseless tragedy, something that's tough for anybody to process. I know my wife and I spent the bulk of the afternoon just trying to put our heads around this. It's so hard, but it's especially tough for kids, for children. And tonight on The Pulse, we're helping you have that conversation with your kids. Developmental psychologist and family therapist, Dr. Erica Bachneck, is with us tonight. And Erica, it's good to see you even under these terrible circumstances. Thanks for being with us here today.
I'm so happy to be able to be here and have this conversation. I wish it was under better circumstances.
We all wish it was. And we know that it's under trauma and under these this dark light that we view this topic. And we took the politics out of this, and we just want to talk about how we can talk to our kids about this. What's the first step in having that conversation?
The very first step, the most important thing that I encourage parents to do before they have the conversation, or any conversation about this tragedy, about the pieces that are connected to it, is really try to identify what is your goal in the conversation that you're about to have with your child.
Very important. I want to get back to that goal in a moment here. Let's focus for a second here on those precious victims who are still alive and bear witness to this terrible tragedy. You heard that young man talk about his friend Victor, who covered him up so that he wouldn't be hurt. When you hear that young man, that young child talk about, we didn't practice for this, we practiced for it at the school. That seems to me at the next level already. When you enter a conversation saying we had to practice something like this in the first place, it speaks and really is a testament to how sad of a time that we live in.
It's true. The way I try to look at it, and I talk to children every day about different kinds of trauma and stress that they experience, and the way that I try to look at it is that for many of our kids, active shooter drills have become part of the protocol at school. And there are ways to deliver this advice, these protocol, these strategies for children in school settings that are not in and of themselves creating trauma. And it really does help prepare children in the event of a potential tragedy.
You talked about the goal of having a conversation with young people or your kids, your nieces, your nephews, whoever it is. When you have these conversations, talk for a moment about what the goal should be And how do we achieve that goal looking at all of the trauma that comes along with the topic?
Well, the truth is there's many goals parents may have in why they would start this conversation. And I took a quick peek at all the information that's kind of floating around the internet right now, because that's where parents often go when they need answers to tough questions. And I think what parents are sort of being inundated with is like, you say this at this age in this situation and exactly say this. And when I talk to parents, I find that it's very hard for people to organize, what am I supposed to say? And this is my child's age, and this is how the conversation's going. And so what I first say is identify what your goal is. For example, if the reason you think you want to have a conversation with your child about this is because this is a tragedy that hit especially close to home, for all of us, we're feeling some kind of way about this. But for many families who maybe are church-going families, or who are going to send their children to Christian schools tomorrow, this may feel especially personal. And their goal in the conversation may be, look, I think this is going to come up at school tomorrow. I think adults are going to be grieving around you, and I want to give you some basic information about what happened so you can make sense of all of that tomorrow. That might be one goal. Other parents might be feeling themselves really full of grief and a lot of heartache and their own trauma. And sometimes, if we are not thoughtful about it, we can start a conversation with a child that is about sort of alleviating those feelings that we're having. We're feeling helpless. I'm a parent too. I have 3 kids. I'm sending them back to school tomorrow myself. And we don't like feeling helpless.
I find this to be a very important part of the conversation. You're talking about taking care of yourself. It's putting the oxygen mask on yourself before helping your child.
Yes.
When you say that we're dealing with our own trauma, oftentimes parents put the cape on and say, I'm going to go sail in and go help my kid. You're saying, take care of yourself first, and those emotions are important to deal with first.
I am, and I want to be really clear. Some therapists are going to say that, focusing on the adult and making sure that the adult's mental health is taken care of, and that is important. But I'm team kid all the time, and I'm saying to parents, for your child's health and well-being, really sort out why you're talking to your child before you do it. It may be that you need to process these events with a friend, a partner, another adult, before you make a decision about what are the parts of this I need my child to know. Now, a lot of parents are going to start these conversations because they want their children to be prepared if they are ever in a crisis like this. And I actually think it's better to have those conversations in less emotionally charged moments, because those are conversations where you really want to be able to focus on facts with your child. And it's sort of better to have small conversations in more casual moments. On a walk to school, pointing out, this is our meeting spot, for example. Don't forget, this is where we'll meet. If there's ever a crisis and you have to run, this is where you'll find me. Or, I know you're engaging in active shooter drills at school. Make sure you're listening to your teacher. They're well trained. In a crisis, it's important that you're following the advice of the adults. Those conversations are really better had in these kind of small doses in easier times.
I find that very interesting, because oftentimes families will say, all right, time for a family meeting, and there's an intensity and a vigor that comes with that. Let's accomplish these things here in this meeting. You're saying the smaller doses may be good. One last question I had for you. How do you know that your child really does need to seek professional help? Because obviously there's a level of being scared and being traumatized that everybody to a certain extent feels. How do you know when it's time to go get help?
Listen, it's never wrong to reach out for support, but some of the red flags you want to look for are if you see marked changes in your child's overall mood or routine, if you see your child sleeping less, sleeping more, if they seem to be starting to move away from healthy activities they once really enjoyed, if it feels like they're not opening up to you in conversation, and maybe they previously did, if you are noticing, especially at younger ages, that they are more labile, crying out of nowhere, more irritable than they normally would be. Now, it's very difficult as I'm talking about these shifts, because it's also the beginning of school for a lot of kids. And
so some of that may already be happening.
You're going to see a lot of adjustment to new routines anyway, and I encourage parents, to not be afraid to talk it out first with your child. Even young children often can engage in that conversation. You might just say, I notice that you seem to be feeling off. How can I be there for you? How can I help? And when all else fails, step it up at home around being really predictable and providing a lot of supportive and joyful parenting and family moments together.
Well, everyone needs that right now, especially the kids, as you say. It is so good to see you, and I'm so grateful that you were here to offer some of this advice, not just for us here in the studio, but for every single mom and dad watching on the other side of that camera. Dr. Erica Bachneck, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're keeping this conversation going after the break with former Detroit Police Chief Ralph Godby and the president of the Security Leaders Coalition, Mike Harwell. How do we keep our places of worship safe? You're watching a special edition of The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on this special edition of The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. But today we take the politics out, toss it away where it belongs, not in this conversation, and talk only tonight about the people and the power we all have to deal with this and move forward in an effort to prevent this from happening again and deal with what has already occurred. Here now to keep the conversation going about the tragedy in Minneapolis, former Detroit Police Chief Ralph Godby and Mike Harwell, the president of the Security Leaders Coalition. It's good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And, you know, Chief, we had you on just the other day
Yes.
to talk about other topics and issues, and here we are now talking about this. Right away, when you see something like this happen, I found it so striking and sad
Yes.
that the young kid who talked said, I was used to doing drills in the school, but I wasn't used to doing it in the church, so I didn't know what to do. What comes to your mind when you hear that?
You know, it's sad that that's just a part of our life. I was chief of police for 2 years at Detroit Public Schools Community District, and those types of drills and preparation, it would be negligible if you didn't do it. But that young man was so poised, considering what he had been through, brought tears to my eyes, literally. You know, I'm a grandfather, and to think that after 27 years in law enforcement, we're really no closer to solving some of these problems than 27 years ago when I started in policing. So it's very sobering. And then from my standpoint, being a minister, preaching in a pulpit where you're in a place where everybody's supposed to be welcomed. We live by whosoever will, let them come. But by the same token, you still have to have a level of vigilance to understand that everybody that comes in a church or by a church may not have the best mindset or motivation. And it's a very vulnerable position. So it's very difficult to navigate security in a religious environment.
You know, I think a little bit about, you know, I'm married to a Christian, I'm Hindu, so I go to the temple once in a while, we go to the church, right? And that's a place where you really do kind of feel vulnerable because you're in the presence of God and community, and you kind of let go and you get lost sometimes in a good way where you're in deep in prayer. And then something like this happens. Mike, this is a place that people really treat as a sanctuary, as they should, but it's also a place where they're most vulnerable in a sense, yes?
That's absolutely correct. A lot of people want to go to be able to go to church or whatever their faith is and worship in peace, harmony, and not have to worry about anything. And unfortunately, we now have to have people in place to protect them so that they can have that peace.
You know, you talk a little bit about protecting the church, right? So from the outside in, we'll talk to both of you about this, but Mike, right now, focusing on what you do, Security Leaders Coalition takes a look at all of these faith-based organizations that have buildings, right? And so we can secure it from the inside out, but this person who did this came from the outside. The only thing that could prevent the bullets from going through that glass would be bulletproof glass. What do you do in a situation when you see what happened here?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because actually we do it backwards. We should be protecting from the outside in.
Yes.
And in a lot of instances where there have been shootings at churches or at schools, the shooting has started on the outside. Had somebody been on the outside, like a mobile patrol or something like that, then they might have been able to see them sooner and protect them. Now, bulletproof glass or some type of laminate on the glass is also a good option. So if the bullets do start coming towards the building, at least you've got something to help stop the bullets from getting through.
It's a sad testament to where we live and how we live today, but it is something that perhaps is an option.
Yes.
Would you say that that's something?
Well, I think that's an option, and again, not to politicize this moment, but it's amazing to me that this device here, to get into it, is biometrically controlled. Either has to use my face. Yet we still have not progressed in technology with guns. There are smart guns that are biometrically controlled that only the person that owns it can use it. Would that have helped in this case? Maybe not. However, we're really lacking in imagination as to how we solve these problems. The Second Amendment, we hold it sacrosanct, but the Constitution is amendable. And when the Constitution was written, they had muskets, they had 6-shooters. They didn't have high-capacity rifles and extended clips. The damage and the carnage that these bullets do to human flesh, it is just unbelievable.
But as a minister and as a chief, you know, as a former chief, that in this particular case, this gun was legally purchased. It was legally this person's gun. And so then we started addressing the other issue, which is about looking at the whole problem here. And Mike, when you look at someone who's disgruntled or angry, this was a former student from this school, right? 23 years old. We have to zoom out and kind of look at these other features of what makes someone think the way they do, right?
You do, and that's not easy to do either. It can be very difficult. It still goes back to the see something, say something.
Yes.
Especially with family members. If they have a family member that they think is having some issues, then they need to try to get some help for them. They need to get the professionals involved. But for out in the open, in the public, lots of times it can be difficult for you and I to pick up on somebody else that's having a mental issue unless they're exhibiting some really bizarre behaviors.
And Rupe, if I can add this, to Mike's point, see something, say something, but we really need to engage our social media companies, our digital marketing, because the algorithms are very adept at pointing out what you want to buy, where you should buy it, all kind of habits. We really need to utilize those algorithms to point out, because there were signs. He posted on YouTube. And typically, when you see manifestos or you see people that have moved in that arena, they give clues long before they actually act out. So we really need to be more smart, for lack of a better term, of how we use algorithms and how we engage social media and digital marketing and utilizing it to assist law enforcement.
There's real intelligence, which is what we see each and every day. There's artificial intelligence, which big tech will boast about what it can do to make a job more efficient. But if we can make surveillance more efficient in a very open way, because look, the person, when they're posting something, it's already out there, right? We can kind of put those pieces together and hopefully help prevent something like that from happening. We'll keep this conversation going. Mike, Chief, good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here tonight on The Pulse.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being a part of this conversation. When we come back, we're talking to community leader Steve Spreitzer after the break, how he says we can all be more tolerant to people with different views than us, and how we can deal with conflicts when we see them arising in others and in ourselves. You're watching a special edition of The Pulse on Fox 2. Welcome back to a special edition of The Pulse here on Fox 2. Here to keep the conversation going about the tragedy in Minneapolis, President and CEO for Michigan Roundtable for Just Communities, Steve Spreitzer. And it's always good to see you, Steve, even under these circumstances. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So you have really made your life sitting down people of different faiths and trying to figure out where the bridges are, and trying to take those gaps and remove them and bring us together. When you saw what happened here today, sadly, this wasn't the first time we've seen it. You've seen this before. What are some things that we should be thinking about, reflecting about, as we try our best to put our heads around this?
Yeah, thanks, Roop. You're right. So today it was the Annunciation Church in Minneapolis. A while ago it was Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. Before that it was Tree of Life Synagogue. Before that, it was the Wisconsin Gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. There was a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. Every group of faith, every congregation is a target. And so what's going through my mind is, one, sadness, all of us weeping, because the people that died today, their families, but many people have experienced violence and they've been triggered today. So there's a lot of people hurting. So first thought was just weep together, then stand together. Bring the best of us, the people of faith together, to stand and then to act. To act.
What can we do when you say act?
Well, I think, part of this challenge is we just don't know the other. That part of the consequences of this very segregated region, and maybe our own human nature, is we go toward people who are like us, and the other becomes the other. And it's much easier to generalize. So the harsh language toward people who are transgender, or people who are of another religion, of another race, of another, it's just because you don't know, you haven't come to know, and much less love and care about them. So I think the message is encourage people to reach out and come to know people who are different. And I think it's in the crucible of listening that you start to understand what it is that person needs that you would have never known short of spending time with them.
No, that's beautiful. I think also you and I often have talked about this, showing people love. And sometimes that's someone that, as you pointed out, looks very different than you. But if there's an absence of love, that vacuum gets filled with all kinds of other stuff. And in this case, I would imagine that this person was in deep pain who did this. And it's just absolutely awful what this person did. But their loved ones, could they have done something to prevent this? That's the question that everybody's asking.
No, it's a great question. And if you are in a space where you're listening and caring about someone, and you have a community that's engaged and looking out for each other, there's a greater likelihood that you may pick up on someone who's in need. The village, right? You create the village, or the Michigan Roundtable is working on the beloved community, creating spaces where people are seen and heard. Hard work, right? But I want to tell you about, and I mentioned this to you earlier, I don't know if this is the time in our conversation, but there was a guy named Pardeep Singh Kalika. His father was murdered with 5 other worshipers in a Sikh Gurdwara. The gunman was, the person who killed him was socialized as a neo-Nazi, white supremacist. I always want to say a person who is, because whatever his label, that's a child of God, child of the Creator.
Sure.
So he came in and shot up the Gurdwara, called them all terrorists. So was he anti-Sikh, or was he anti-Muslim? Or was he just confused? But he was very angry. So after the shooting, Pardeep sat down with his brother. His brother thought, we got to get revenge. And Pardeep says, no, I'm going to go to where he is from and bring them love. And he has spent the last 15 or so years developing the SEVA project, the international project of de-radicalizing people who are in that movement. And he has accomplished a great amount. So in Kalkaska, Michigan, the village president called for death to all Muslims back in 2017. The community asked me to help them organize, change the narrative, and just try to find their way out of that. The Michigan militia was gathering up there. It was pretty scary. Wife said, don't go up there. But Pardeep was my coach. And so I was going up there, and he goes, have you met with the village president? I go, not yet, I've been trying. He goes, make sure you let him know he's loved. And I was just dropped to my knees because I didn't have the psychospiritual strength or energy to really authentically do that. And so ever since then, I've been trying to think of whatever I do spiritually or religiously, how will that help me to authentically be able to love the other, whoever that is in my life?
Sure.
And hopefully we can help each other do that, Roop.
Well, I think this conversation could help perhaps introduce that concept to those who aren't thinking that way. I myself try my best. If I get a racist email or a hateful email, people say you shouldn't respond. I said, sometimes you should, because when you do, the person sees you maybe more of a human being, and they should. And maybe that conversation loosens up the hate and fills it with love. Yeah. We hope that that happens, but we'll keep working at it. It's the only thing we can do is continue to try to do that kind of work. So I want to thank you and Ernest for dedicating your life to that. You've always done a great job with that. Conservatives, liberals, people of all faiths have come and talked to you about this, and you've always done a great job.
Oh,
thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Roop.
Great to see you, all right? Thanks for your time. That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was good to be with you. Wishing you all peace.